In this lesson, we'll set up the task in our application to allow the user to have its own configuration file. In the previous lesson, we managed to create this config file. It contains everything that we need to know about our settings in order to connect to the email servers. This time, we're going to let the user create its own config file so we can load it. For that purpose, I'm going to go to the tasks folder and create a new setup task. The setup.rb file will hold that class. Let's go to the courier module and create the setup task. The setup task is just an enclosure that we'll use inside the app.rb file. We'll create a new method called setup, and we're going to call that service. So the task variable will be the new instance of setup task. And all we need to do is call the execute method on it. That's all we need to do. Let me just complement the information on this method. So there you go. That's all we need to do in regards to the Thor app. Let's go to the setup task again, and let's define that execute method. The execute method will consist of many different steps. First of all, we're going to ask the user for some data, and after that data is asked for, we're going to try and connect to the server. After that, we're going to ask for the sent folder. You might not know exactly which one it is, so we're going to connect and ask the user for the respective folder. We're going to save it and write the file. Okay, the first step, as I've mentioned, is asking for the data. Then we're going to ask for the sent folder, and then we're going to save the file. And that's it. That's all we need to do in regards to the steps that we need to perform. Let's create those methods really quick. The first one is ask for data, then ask for sent folder, and finally the save method. All of these will be private. So there you go. We have the entire set of methods. We now need to fill them. These are going to be a little big, so I'm just going to paste some code inside each different method. I'm going to explain you what each different line does. The ask for data method is going to ask for the email address, and we are going to calculate the domain after that. This is just so we can get a default setup for the IMAP and SMTP servers. This is just a default option that the user can rely on. If you're going to use a Gmail address, then you would specify your email account at gmail.com. If you reach out to the domain, which is going to be gmail.com, we can easily assume that the IMAP server is going to be something like this, and the SMTP something like this. That's why we are relying on that domain. This is just to improve the experience for the user. So the password will also be asked for, and we're going to pass in the echo option so that each time a user types in a letter for the password, it's going to be replaced with a star, much like a password field in any browser. So that's it for this method. We're going to gather each different part of the configuration file, which we'll use later for the remaining methods. The ask for sent folder will connect to the actual IMAP server, request the folders, and we're going to ask the user for the one that matches the sent folder. Well, if you think about it for a second, we already have a service that lists all of our folders. Let's use it. I'm going to go to listfolders.new and assign it to a service variable. I'm going to execute the service, and I'm going to list all of the folders. So we get the instance variable. Now we can loop through each one of the folders. I'm going to print out the content of each folder, and I'm just going to print out the name. Next, we are going to ask for the actual folder. I'm going to ask for the sent folder here, as you can see, and so I'm going to use the ask method to request the specific folder. So I'm going to ask, what is your sent folder? And the user will be able to specify which one. Actually, now that I think of it, let's do something different. I'm going to use the each index method, so I'll use the actual index over the folder, and then I'm going to print the actual index and the current folder's name in that position. So the first thing is the index, and then the respective folder. So folders, index, like you see here. Close the brackets, and you should be good to go. The sent folder will be something different. Instead, I'm going to capture the actual index, and the sent folder will be the one that matches that index. So sent folder will be folders, index to I. Remember, we are capturing a string, we need to convert it to an integer. There's one thing about this which is not right. In fact, if we go to the list folders class, let me open it up in a new tab. This service is already relying on the configuration. So it's important that we save the changes first into that file, then reload the configuration, and only then we'll be able to execute the service without any compromise. So what we'll do first is call the save method, and then we're going to add in a reload method. The reload method will reload the entire configuration. So the save method will need to pick up on the data that we have, pick up on a standard template, and write it to disk. So we'll need that template. The template is going to be inside our very own project. So we'll use something like this, file.expandPath, and then I'll pass a string related to this very file. You use this reference to establish a point of comparison to the first argument. So let's see, we are inside the setup class, and we want to make sure we reach out to the previous folder, one level more, and only then we're going to reach to a templates folder, and I want the courier.yaml.erb file. This is the actual template's path. So let me change this to path, and the template is going to be a new instance of ERB for the contents of that path. So I'll use file.read, and then we'll need to pass in a binding. We're actually going to use our very own binding, the binding for this class. The binding is a special object inside each class, which allows us to use ERB and associate it with the instance variables in our object. This means that when going for the template, we'll be able to use such instance variables like user, password, IMAP server, SMTP server, and so on. So then we'll need to type in template.result, and only then we'll be able to use the binding. I was wrong about this, so let's just remove that. You use the new ERB instance, pass in the contents of the file, and only then you use the result method and assign it into a content variable. This is what we're going to write into disk. So let's just go ahead and use file.open, pass in the new file, and I'm going to use dir.home, and then the new location, so .courier.yaml. Also, we'll need to use file.join, so we get the full path. Now about the open method, we'll need to specify that we should use a write-only flag. This will wipe out the entire content of the file, so we'll start fresh. Let's pass a block so that the file is closed immediately after the block is yielded. So I'm going to type in file.write content. That's all we need to do. Okay, we're reaching somewhere. All we need to do is define the reload command, which is going to delegate to config.reload. This reload method will be in the config module, so we'll need to define it. So self.reload, and what we'll do is we're going to remove these definitions and load the entire thing again. So instead of using const set, I'm going to use remove const and delete everything at the right side. I'm also going to remove this entire piece because we don't need the second argument. So remove the entire list of constants in the config module and load them again. So now is the time we set this all up. I'm going to clear the screen and run the command courier setup. This will boot the entire thing. So if we're lucky, we're going to have a courier.yaml file that resembles very closely what we already had. Let's run this, and you can see that we don't have the setup task enabled, or at least referenced in the courier.rb file. I'm going to copy this line and switch this to setup. With that out of the way, let's run this again. You can see that it's requiring our email address, so I'm going to type it in. Then it will ask us for the password, and you can see that the stars are being filled in. Then it's going to ask for the IMAP server, and I'm going to type it in, and the SMTP server as well. You can now see that we don't have that template. Notice how the path is correct. We're going to the lib folder, courier, templates, courier.yaml.drb. So let's go to the courier folder and add in a templates folder, and inside the courier.yaml.erb file. Let's open it and start filling in the template. We'll have a user variable, a password variable, then the SMTP server, the IMAP server, and also the send folder. This is also very important. Now let's go ahead and implement some ERB tags, and we're going to use, for example, the send folder here, and the remaining for the respective places. There you go. All I'm going to do, just for security measure, I'm going to wrap all of these inside double quotes. That way, if you add in some funny characters, they will be properly escaped. So this should be good to go. Now that we have the template, we can use it by running the exact same command again. I'll type in the email address, then the password. Let's also specify the IMAP server and the SMTP server. Well, what do you know? We still have that binding that I left behind. So let me just go ahead and exit the binding. And there you go. You can see that we have 5 different folders, but we are missing the actual folder's name. Let's fix that really quick. Let's find that pry instruction first. So there you go, in the list folder service. So that's out of the way. Now let's go ahead to the setup task. The setup task needs something. In this case, all we need to pass in is the name and not the actual folder instance. It seems everything is okay. After all, we've been able to connect to the IMAP server, so it means that the file is being written successfully. Also, the reload instruction is working. There you go. Now we get the correct names, so I'm going to type in the number 3, which is the folder I want to specify, and there you go. It seems that everything is okay. But there's one thing that I've missed, and that is to pass in the name instruction here. I want the actual name and not the instance. You should be able to run this again, and the correct folder would be presented. All we need to make sure now is that the file actually exists with the proper information. There you go. You can see that the folder object is printed out in the send folder. The fix we did previously should make up for this mistake. Congratulations on extracting your configuration data and also for allowing the user to specify his own data. That wraps up for this entire exercise. Much of this is incomplete because the specification for the IMAP protocol is actually pretty big. But this is a small step in learning about Ruby and object-oriented techniques. Let's jump into the next lesson where we'll finally publish our gem into a private server and use it in a production-like environment. See you soon.